Black male, 30s, 6'1", gray hoodie, armed heroin dealer, Bolo. All units respond now. The radio tore through the hot Detroit air like a siren inside a storm. Sergeant Derek Deke Monroe's hand froze on the steering wheel. Officer Lucas Luke Harlan's pulse spiked to 189, and Officer Mia Valdez, her finger already on the trigger guard, whispered, "Got him." It was 4:12 in the afternoon, Greektown packed with tourists, sunlight bouncing off casino glass, and within seconds, 3 Detroit police officers were about to make the worst mistake of their lives. Before going into this story, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It helps us bring you more true stories like this one, stories that shake a city, and remind us how fast justice can turn into chaos. The call had come in fast. A real bolo, not a drill. A suspected heroin dealer seen near the Greektown casino. The kind of call that made young officers feel alive. The adrenaline, the radio noise, the false promise that heroism could erase pain. Luke sat behind the wheel, gripping it hard. He wasn't supposed to drive yet. He'd only been out of academy 6 months. But Sergeant Deke Monroe let him, saying, "You're the son of a legend, right? Let's see what you got." Luke's father had been the city's police chief, shot dead in a failed bank robbery 12 years ago. Every stop, every arrest, every twitch of a suspect's hand reminded Luke of that day. Deke leaned back in his seat, pretending to scan the crowd through his sunglasses. What the others didn't know. What would soon come crashing into daylight. Was that 20 minutes earlier? Deke had walked out of the casino restroom with $18,000 stuffed in an envelope under his vest. Tyrone T-Bone Watts, one of Detroit's most dangerous drug bosses, had slipped it to him with 5 quiet words. Don't touch the man in gray. That was the deal. Let the real suspect walk. Make noise somewhere else. Deke told himself it was just one favor. One bad decision to pay off $55,000 in gambling debt. But one favor is how corruption begins, and how justice starts to rot. Mia Valdez sat in the back seat, tapping her knee, scanning every sidewalk face. She was 25, the daughter of a mechanic from Mexican town, a rookie with a record of aggression she thought made her respected. She didn't trust anyone who looked too relaxed in a crowd, especially not a black man in a hoodie. See something. Say something. She muttered under her breath. Her bias ran deep, learned from the streets she grew up in, the fear, the survival, the constant sense of threat. She was waiting for confirmation to act. Then Luke saw him, across the street, under the blue and white striped awning of a Greek diner, stood Isaiah Zay Brooks, gray hoodie, AirPods, eating a souvlaki like he hadn't a care in the world. Luke's mind flashed back to the dispatch, armed and dangerous. He didn't see the badge tucked under the hoodie or the tiny mic wire that ran down Zay's sleeve. He only saw the image burned into his memory. His father's killer. Same color, same posture, same calm before the gunfire. "That's him," Luke whispered, voice trembling with certainty and old grief. Deke didn't even look. He just said, "Move in now." His eyes darted toward the casino entrance where the real suspect, T-Bone's runner, was already slipping away through the crowd. He knew it. He let him go. He needed the distraction. The rookie's mistake would cover his betrayal. "Go, go, go!" Deke shouted, unbuckling his seatbelt, pretending to be in command. Luke jumped out of the cruiser first. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" he yelled, voice cracking from both fear and excitement. Zay turned, confused, a piece of pita still in his hand. "You got the wrong," he started. But Mia was already beside Luke, gun drawn, eyes sharp. "Freeze!" she barked, shouting a racial slur so vicious it made the crowd gasp. Phones came up, recording every second. Zay's instincts kicked in. 8 years undercover with the DEA had taught him not to fight cops in the open, but the rage, The humiliation and the disbelief all collided inside him. "I'm a federal agent," he said, voice steady but low, one hand half raised. Luke didn't hear it. He saw a suspect resisting. The blow came fast. Luke's fist cracked across Zay's nose, a sickening snap echoing louder than the screams around them. Blood splattered across Luke's body cam lens. Mia moved closer, pressing her gun to the back of Zay's head as he staggered. "Down! Down on your knees!" the crowd shouted. "He's DEA!" But Deke fired a shot into the air, pretending to create order while sowing panic. "Gun! He's reaching!" he shouted, lying through his teeth. Luke kicked Zay's knee from behind. Zay fell forward, palms on the hot pavement, face bleeding. He whispered one phrase under his breath, almost inaudible under the noise. Code Black. Those two words would change everything. Deke reached down, grabbing Zay by the collar. "Where's your stash? Huh? You think we're stupid?" He yanked the hood back, saw the AirPods, the calm eyes staring back at him, and for a split second, Deke felt a chill, a warning, maybe even guilt. But greed kills conscience fast. He shut off his body cam. 11 seconds of blackout. That's all it took for the line between misconduct and felony to vanish. When the camera flickered back on, blood was everywhere. Zay's left eye swollen shut, cheek split open, shirt soaked, Luke's breathing ragged, hands shaking, Mia's voice trembling with adrenaline, yelling orders that made no sense. Civilians kept filming. The smell of gunpowder and sweat hung thick. Deke straightened his uniform, acting like nothing happened. "Suspect secured," he said into the radio, his voice steady, practiced, empty. What no one on that street knew was that Zay's whisper, Code Black, had already reached the DEA command post. The GPS embedded in his AirPod mic activated an alert, a federal signal, silent but powerful. In 3 minutes and 42 seconds, a tactical team would descend on Greektown with armored trucks and federal warrants. And when they did, the badge that Deke had sold for $18,000 would cost him his life, his team their freedom, and Detroit its trust. At that moment, though, Luke stood trembling over Zay's body, believing he had just saved the city from another criminal. The crowd's shouts blurred into a single roar. Somewhere behind him, a phone camera caught every frame, the punch, the slur, the shot, the blood. Somewhere across the street, inside the casino restroom, a small surveillance camera recorded Deke's earlier handshake with T-Bone Watts. And in one corner of the plaza, a young journalist named Ava Kim adjusted her lens, whispering to herself, "Oh my God, I just got all of it." The story that would soon be called the Greektown Incident had begun. 3 officers chasing a ghost suspect, 1 federal agent nearly killed, and 1 city about to confront the cost of a single lie. It started with a radio call, and within minutes, it would expose how one corrupted badge could turn a bolo into a bloodstain, and how justice, when filmed, never dies quietly. "Get on the ground now." Luke's voice cracked through the humid Detroit air, half command, half fear. Zay didn't move fast enough for their liking. Mia's gun pressed against the back of his head, her hand trembling but her tone sharp. "I said freeze," she shouted, louder this time, as if decibels could make up for doubt. The tourists stopped eating, phones went up, gasps filled the plaza. For 1 tense second, everything froze. The smell of souvlaki, the heat bouncing off pavement, the reflection of police lights on chrome. Then chaos swallowed Greektown whole. The first strike came fast. Luke lunged forward, grabbing the front of Zay's hoodie. "Hands up!" he yelled again, twisting the fabric, his knuckles white. Zay tried to speak, but the words barely came out. "I'm a federal agent." His sentence ended with the crack of a fist. Luke's punch hit square across the bridge of Zay's nose. The sound, cartilage snapping, was caught by half a dozen cameras and one body cam that would later become Exhibit A. Blood sprayed across Luke's vest, across the lens of his Axon Body 4, painting a red haze over the recording. Zay stumbled back, eyes wide, nose bleeding, ears ringing. The taste of iron filled his mouth. For 8 years, he had faced cartel soldiers, informants with knives, and backroom betrayals, but never this. Not from people sworn to protect. He lifted his left hand, slow and deliberate, fingers spread. "Check my ID." He tried to say again. The words came out thick, muffled by blood. Mia shoved him harder, the barrel of her Glock digging into his neck. "Shut up. You think I don't know your game?" Her voice carried that mix of fear and pride that comes from never admitting you might be wrong. "Deke." "He's resisting," she called out. Deke stood a few feet away, pretending to survey the perimeter. He fired a single round into the air. Pure theater. The sound sent tourists screaming toward the street. To anyone watching, it looked like the suspect had pulled a gun. But Deke knew better. There was no weapon. This was about creating panic, noise, distraction, anything to keep eyes off the casino door, where the real suspect, the man carrying 2 kilos of heroin, was slipping into a black Escalade and vanishing. When the echo of the gunshot faded, Deke stepped in. "Secure him!" he barked. Luke, adrenaline pumping, pressed Zay's face to the pavement. Zay groaned, coughing blood onto the sidewalk. The crowd shouted, "He's DEA! He's an agent!" But no one listened. Deke's finger found the small button on his chest rig, the one that controlled his body cam. He hesitated for half a breath, then pressed it. The red light blinked off. 11 seconds of silence. 11 seconds that would haunt a courtroom, a city, and a conscience. During those seconds, the crowd saw what the camera didn't. Deke brought down the butt of his pistol like a hammer, striking Zay across the temple. The blow made a dull thud, enough to split skin, not to kill. Zay's vision blurred, the world spinning. He tried again. Code. Black. The words came out like a rasp, barely audible, but somewhere in a control room 3 miles away. A DEA technician saw a flashing signal on his monitor, a distress code from an undercover transmitter. At the same moment, across the street, Ava Kim, freelance journalist, part-time live streamer, zoomed in with her DJI camera. She had followed Deke from the casino restroom minutes earlier, after catching something strange, an envelope of cash changing hands under a hand dryer. She'd started filming on instinct, streaming to her 3,000 followers. Now, as she captured the stop from afar, her audience count jumped to 10,000, then 100,000. "This looks bad," she whispered into the mic. "They're beating someone who's not even resisting." Zay tried to push himself up, but Luke's knee pressed down hard between his shoulder blades. "Stop resisting!" Luke yelled again, louder than before, his voice cracked, part command, part panic, part echo of his father's last radio call. "Suspect armed!" he shouted. Though he saw no weapon, he just saw the outline of fear, the ghost of his father's killer, the illusion of threat that lived inside his head. Mia screamed, "Don't move!" and kicked Zay's ribs. 1, 2, 3 times. She wasn't trained for calm, only for control. "You think we're stupid?" she spat, breathing hard. "You think that badge makes you better?" Then, from somewhere under him, Zay's hand twitched. His fingers brushed the small mic cord running under his hoodie. The device sent a brief pulse, a distress beacon known only to DEA agents. The signal traveled faster than any scream. The next thing they heard wasn't Zay's voice. It was the sound of engines, black SUVs, fast and close, Unit Alpha, eyes on location. Came a clipped voice over an encrypted channel. Code Black confirmed, target compromised. But the officers on scene didn't hear that. Their radios were still tuned to Detroit PD frequencies, cluttered with noise about other calls, other emergencies. Deke glanced toward the sound of sirens. They were close, too close. He wiped his hand on his vest, smearing Zay's blood like a stain he couldn't undo. "He's going down for this," he muttered, "federal or not." Then he leaned close to Luke. "You did good, kid. Don't second guess." Luke nodded, trying to convince himself. But something inside him cracked, a flicker of doubt, buried under years of training and grief. He didn't even fight. He said quietly, "Doesn't matter." Deke replied, stepping back, straightening his uniform. "We control the narrative." What none of them saw was the small blinking light on Zay's AirPod mic, proof that his words, his gasps, and every hit were being transmitted in real time to federal receivers. Ava's livestream count hit 3 million. "They're still hitting him," she whispered, voice shaking. "Oh my God." They shut the body cam off. The chat exploded. Viewers tagging local news, posting timestamps, demanding names. When the Axon cam blinked back on, it caught Luke breathing hard, Mia yelling incoherently, and Deke wiping sweat from his brow. The audio picked up the bystanders screaming, "He's DEA! Look at his badge!" Luke looked down, finally seeing it, the gold shield half hidden under blood. He froze. His throat went dry. "Sarge," he whispered. "He's... Shut it." Deke snapped. "Too late now." Zay coughed, his voice hoarse, broken but steady. "You just assaulted a federal officer." Those words hit like a verdict. Luke stumbled back. The camera caught everything, the badge, the blood, the trembling rookie. The crowd's outrage grew louder, somewhere behind the yellow casino lights. Police backup began to arrive, but the first ones through the intersection weren't local cops. They were federal agents, body armor, rifles up, moving fast. Zay, half conscious, whispered again. Code Black confirmed, and before anyone could react. The DEA SWAT unit surrounded the plaza, engines idling, doors slamming, voices shouting, "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" Luke's gun fell first, then Mia's. Deke hesitated. He thought about running, thought about the cash, thought about his career. But before he could decide, 2 agents tackled him to the ground. The crowd cheered. In less than 4 minutes, the hunters had become the hunted, as Zay was lifted onto a stretcher, blood streaking down his face. He looked toward Luke, the rookie whose hand still trembled from the punch that changed both their lives. Zay didn't speak. He just stared, and Luke, for the first time, saw the man he'd almost killed, not a suspect, not a threat, but a reflection of everything broken inside the badge he wore. It all began with one mistake. But in Greektown that day, one mistake was enough to burn down the blue wall itself. The moment Sergeant Deke Monroe pressed that button, the red light on his body cam went dark. 11 seconds. Not long in the span of a day, but long enough to destroy 3 lives and fracture a city. The camera's silence became a void where law vanished and brutality took its place. In those 11 seconds, power shifted, blood spilled, and a system meant to protect showed its ugliest face. When the video feed resumed, it showed Isaiah Zay Brooks lying half-conscious on the pavement, his gray hoodie torn, his cheek split open, blood pooling beneath his chin. His left eye was swollen shut. Luke Harlan's body cam caught only fragments, the aftermath, the panic, the breathless noise. But what it missed during those 11 seconds would become the centerpiece of 2 federal trials. Inside that blackout, Deke had swung the butt of his Glock like a club, striking Zay across the face. He did it once, then again, while Mia Valdez shouted curses that echoed off the storefront glass. Luke froze, horrified, whispering, "Sarge, stop." But Deke snarled back, "He's faking. You want him to shoot us?" And though Luke's hands shook, he didn't intervene. Fear held him still. The man who had promised to protect him, his sergeant, his mentor, had crossed a line, and Luke followed without meaning to. Across the street, journalist Ava Kim was filming everything, Her live stream, already past 2 million viewers, caught not only the fight, but the moment before it. The footage from the casino restroom, hours earlier. Ava had trailed Deke into the Greektown casino after noticing his badge number during a prior corruption hearing. When she saw him accept an envelope from a man known as Tyrone T-Bone Watts, she knew something was off. Her camera caught the exchange in perfect focus. Deke's gloved hand, the envelope's edge, and a faint laugh under the sound of running water. She hadn't planned to expose it that day, but fate delivered her the rest of the story, as Deke's camera blinked back on. The recording captured him breathing heavily, looking around like a man waking from a trance. "Suspect secured," he said into his radio, the practiced calm of someone who'd lied before. The dispatcher's voice came back. "Copy that. Greektown unit. Nobody at headquarters knew what had really happened. Not yet." Zay's body trembled. He tried to lift his head, managed only an inch. "You don't know what you just did," he muttered. Voice slurred. His hand reached weakly toward his hoodie pocket. Not for a weapon, but for his badge. Luke kicked it away. "Stay down," he shouted, as if sound could erase guilt. From the corner of the crowd came a woman's scream. "He's a federal agent. Look at his ID." Phones zoomed in, catching the glint of gold under the blood. Deke saw it too, for a brief second. His confidence cracked. Then, like a gambler doubling down, he looked at his rookies and said, "We're in this together now. You hear me?" No one talks. Mia nodded instantly, fear clouding judgment. Luke hesitated, his heart hammered in his chest. He saw his father's face, the old police chief, the funeral, the folded flag. Do the job right. His father's voice echoed in memory. But right isn't always safe. Luke wanted to walk away, but his feet wouldn't move. Meanwhile, on the other end of the city, in a quiet apartment overlooking the Detroit River, Jada Brooks sat on her couch watching Ava Kim's live stream. She was 12 weeks pregnant and had just returned from her doctor's appointment. Her phone buzzed with a message from her ex-husband. Zay. "Finished for the day? Grabbing dinner in Greektown?" That was 5 minutes before she saw him on screen, face down on the pavement, blood pouring from his nose. The feed was chaotic. Voices, sirens, confusion. But the image was unmistakable. Jada's hand went to her stomach. She felt something twist, a sharp pain. "No, no, no," she whispered. Her pulse raced. The stress, the shock, the helplessness all hit at once. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was doubled over, tears streaming down her face. Later, at the hospital, doctors confirmed what she already feared. The baby didn't survive. Back at the scene, the sound of sirens grew louder. Not Detroit PD. These were federal engines. Black SUVs marked with small silver lettering, DEA Tactical Division. They were responding to Zay's distress code. Code Black wasn't just an alert, it was a rescue protocol used only when an undercover agent's life was in immediate danger. When that signal went off, it mobilized everything. 3 minutes and 42 seconds after Zay whispered the words, the first tactical truck pulled into the intersection, DEA SWAT spilled out, rifles drawn, moving with mechanical precision. "Federal agents!" one shouted. "Drop your weapons!" Luke froze. Still crouched beside Zay, Mia raised her gun halfway, confusion flooding her eyes. Deke reached for his radio, but before he could speak, a DEA officer tackled him from behind, wrenching the Glock from his hand. "Down! You're under arrest for assaulting a federal officer!" The street erupted. Civilians cheered. Others screamed. News drones hovered overhead, broadcasting live. Within seconds, the entire confrontation became national news, inside the chaos. One of the SWAT medics knelt beside Zay. "Agent Brooks, you with us?" Zay blinked, one eye swollen shut. "Yeah," he whispered, the word barely audible. The medic pressed a bandage against his wound. We got you. You're safe. But Zay didn't feel safe. He felt hollow, stripped of dignity, of trust, of the illusion that the badge still meant something. Deke was cuffed on the spot. He protested, shouting, "You don't understand. It was a mistake." The SWAT leader turned to him coldly. "You shut your camera off." "Sergeant, 11 seconds. That's not a mistake. That's intent." Luke stood motionless as they read him his rights. He didn't resist. He just stared at Zay being lifted onto a stretcher. The rookie's hands shook so violently that an agent had to hold his wrist steady just to get the cuffs on. "I didn't mean to," he tried to say, but the words died in his throat. Mia was silent. Tears streaked her face. Cutting through the dust, she kept whispering the same phrase under her breath, over and over. "I didn't know." Ava Kim followed the agents, camera rolling, narrating in disbelief. "You're seeing it live," she said softly to her audience. "Federal agents have just arrested 3 Detroit police officers in Greektown. This is history." By the time the sun dipped behind the casino towers, the scene looked like a war zone. Dozens of federal vehicles lined the street. Reporters crowded barricades and in the back of an ambulance. Zay Brooks lay still, his breathing shallow, his thoughts somewhere between rage and exhaustion. He thought about the way Luke's hands trembled, the fear in Mia's voice, and the emptiness in Deke's eyes. He thought about how it had all started with one radio call, a description too vague, a prejudice too strong, a system too fragile to protect anyone from itself. In the hospital later that night, doctors counted his injuries: a broken nose, fractured cheekbone, mild concussion, nothing fatal. But the emotional wounds ran deeper. He couldn't stop replaying the 11 seconds of darkness, 11 seconds that erased years of service, honor, and belief in the uniform. At 10:47 that night, Internal Affairs opened an emergency investigation. The casino surveillance video of Deke's bribery surfaced, leaked by a source claiming to be inside the security team. The city's chief of police held a brief press conference, his face pale. "We are cooperating fully with federal authorities," he said. "This department will not tolerate corruption or abuse." But behind the podium, everyone knew. This was bigger than one bad sergeant. It was about the cracks in a blue wall that had been crumbling for years, and somewhere in a federal evidence room, a small file was labeled, "The Greektown Incident." Inside that file, investigators noted a single line: body cam blackout, 11 seconds, unaccounted for, consequence, national. The streets of Greektown were still shaking when the black SUVs stopped hard at the curb. Doors slammed, rifles rose, and in a flash of authority and disbelief, the hunters became the hunted. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" The command cut through the air like a verdict. Luke froze, gun halfway raised, chest heaving. Mia stumbled back, tears already forming. Deke Monroe, for a split second, considered drawing his weapon, but survival beat pride. His Glock clattered to the pavement as 2 DEA officers closed in, shouting over each other, pinning him to the hood of his own cruiser. The city stood still, staring at 3 cops in cuffs. Zay Brooks lay on a stretcher only 10 feet away, blood still trickling from his nose. The flashing lights painted his face red and blue, the same colors that once meant safety. His ears rang, his body throbbed, but his mind was clear. He watched Luke's hands tremble as the rookie tried to explain himself to the agents cuffing him. It was a mistake. Luke stammered. We thought he had a weapon." The agent in front of him said nothing, only replied with the cold precision of procedure. "You assaulted a federal officer. You'll get your chance to explain in court." Mia Valdez stood to the side, trembling, eyes fixed on the blood on her hands. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear I didn't know." No one answered her. The crowd had grown thicker, phones everywhere, flashing, recording. narrating history as it happened. The same city that had once cheered for police parades now filmed its own reckoning. Captain Vanessa Reed arrived at the scene 10 minutes later, hair tied back, face pale under the glare of news cameras. She had been in a budget meeting when she heard the words, "Federal officer assaulted." She didn't expect it to involve her own team. As she stepped out of her SUV, a DEA supervisor met her halfway. "Captain Reed, your sergeant and 2 officers are in federal custody." Vanessa's throat tightened. "What happened?" The agent's answer was short, almost rehearsed. "They attacked one of ours. Undercover agent, caught on camera, and..." He hesitated, handing her a tablet. "This just surfaced from casino surveillance." She looked down. The screen showed Deke Monroe accepting an envelope of cash from Tyrone T-Bone Watts in the Greektown casino restroom. Her heart sank. She didn't need to ask what it meant. She'd known Deke for years, cocky, reckless, but not stupid. Or so she thought. She exhaled, trying to hold her composure as reporters swarmed closer. One shouted, "Captain Reed, are your officers corrupt?" Another yelled, "Will the department cooperate with the federal investigation?" She said nothing, only whispered to the agent beside her, "Get them out of here before the cameras eat them alive." The federal team loaded Luke, Mia, and Deke into separate vehicles. Deke turned once, catching Vanessa's eyes. His look wasn't of guilt. It was defiance mixed with something darker. She knew that look. It was the same one her son wore when he tried to lie his way out of trouble. And that thought cut deeper than she expected. Because her son was battling addiction, a secret she'd kept from internal affairs for months. The department couldn't afford another scandal. Not under her command, but now. Everything she'd hidden was about to come out. Across town. Journalist Ava Kim was editing her footage inside a coffee shop. Her live stream had ended at 3.4 million views. Now, her inbox was overflowing with calls from national networks. CNN, MSNBC, even BBC wanted the video rights, but Ava didn't sell it. Not yet. She uploaded the clip of Deke taking the cash, set it to premiere at midnight, and wrote a single caption, "The truth always leaks." By the time midnight came, Detroit was no longer just a city. It was a headline. The Internal Affairs Division launched an emergency audit. Detective Ray Old School Carter, a veteran investigator who had once partnered with Luke's late father, was assigned lead. Ray didn't sleep that night. He watched every frame of footage, the Bolo dispatch, the body cam blackout, the casino tape, the DEA arrest. When the case file appeared on his monitor, he paused. He knew what those 11 seconds meant. He also knew what losing another Harlan to scandal would do to him personally. At dawn, Captain Reed entered his office. "Ray, you're leading this one." "I figured," he said quietly. "You sure you want me to?" "I'm not exactly neutral." "Neither am I," she replied, staring at the coffee cup in her hands. "But I trust you to find the truth, not a story. By 9 a.m., the story was already out. Ava's video had exploded online. Her footage showed Deke laughing with T-Bone Watts, sliding the envelope into his vest, washing his hands like nothing happened. The audio picked up Deke's voice clearly. "Consider it handled." The caption below read, "Handled. The price of $18,000. News outlets replayed the clip side by side with Luke's body cam footage. The punch, the blood, the slur, every second dissected, analyzed, and condemned. Detroit's mayor called for an emergency press conference. "This is a tragedy and a disgrace," he said, "but it's also an opportunity to confront a culture that's been broken too long." Deke Monroe never made it to the precinct that morning. At 10:42 a.m., officers found his patrol car parked behind an abandoned service station near 8 Mile. The engine was running, a single bullet wound to the head. On the passenger seat lay a folded note, written in block letters, "I sold my badge for $18,000. It wasn't worth it. When the news reached Captain Reed, she closed her office door and sat in silence. The department issued a brief statement. Sergeant Monroe died by suicide during an ongoing investigation. But for Reed, it was more than paperwork. It was another crack in a wall that had already begun to crumble. Luke and Mia remained in federal holding. Luke hadn't eaten in 24 hours. He kept replaying the moment in his head. The fist, the blood, the badge, over and over until it no longer felt real. "I didn't mean to," he said again and again. But intent didn't matter anymore. The video spoke louder than he ever could. Mia's attorney advised her to stay quiet. She didn't. She broke down during her first interview with Internal Affairs. "I said that word," she confessed. "I don't even know why. It just came out. Everyone was shouting. I thought he was dangerous." "Do you regret it?" the investigator asked. Her voice cracked. "Every day I breathe." As the week unfolded, the city's pressure built. Protesters gathered outside police headquarters. Signs read, "A bolo isn't a death warrant and justice for Zay." Federal prosecutors prepared charges. The FBI joined the investigation into the casino bribery. In the hospital, Zay recovered slowly, his jaw wired, his vision blurry, his mind a storm of questions. The agents who visited him spoke in calm tones. "You'll testify when ready." One said. He nodded. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about justice, not just for himself, but for every name lost under bad judgment and worse leadership. 3 days later, Judge Amara Singh authorized the federal indictment. The courtroom lights would soon shine where the sirens once screamed. Detroit had turned a crime scene into a trial room, and what began as a radio call in Greektown had now become a national mirror. The footage from those 11 seconds, the casino bribe, and the live stream that refused to fade, together, they formed a new kind of record, not just evidence, a warning. By the end of that week, one officer was dead, 2 were charged, and 1 agent was preparing to testify. But beneath all the noise, one quiet truth remained. Justice had finally arrived, and it was wearing no badge at all. The courtroom was silent when Judge Amara Singh entered. Her black robe moved like a shadow across the polished floor, her face calm, unreadable. The United States flag stood behind her, perfectly still under the heavy lights. On one side sat Luke Harlan, pale and shaking. On the other, Mia Valdez, eyes red from sleepless nights. Between them, an empty chair reserved for Sergeant Derek Deke Monroe, the man who would never take that seat. His suicide had left a hole in the story, but not in the evidence. The words "I sold my badge for $18,000 were printed across the first page of the prosecution's exhibit binder. The nation was watching, every network, every screen, every family who'd ever whispered that justice never came when it should. Federal prosecutor Elaine Park stood first. She was calm, steady, and surgical, Your Honor. The United States charges former Officer Lucas Harlan and Officer Mia Valdez with civil rights violations and assault on a federal officer. She paused, letting the gravity sink in. This is not about one bad stop. This is about what happens when bias replaces judgment and power goes unchecked. Luke shifted in his seat, his hands clasped tight. The footage was cued on the screen beside the jury box. The moment the play button clicked, the room filled with sound, the radio call, the shouts, the slap of shoes against pavement, then the hit, the gasp, the word that cut through the courtroom like a blade. "Freeze," she shouted, a racial slur following so harsh it echoed back at her. "Later." Mia flinched when she heard her own voice. Prosecutor Park let the silence stretch for 10 long seconds before speaking. "You just heard it. That's not training. That's hate. That's a choice." Luke lowered his head. He didn't look at Mia. He couldn't. Then came the footage from the casino, Deke Monroe taking the envelope. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The camera caught his grin. the handoff, and the whispered words, "Don't touch the man in gray." Park turned to the jury. This case began with corruption and ended with blood. Sergeant Monroe took $18,000 to protect a drug trafficker. He ordered his rookies to move in on the wrong man, a man whose only crime was eating lunch. That man was DEA Special Agent Isaiah Brooks. All eyes turned toward the witness stand. Zay sat upright, his face still marked with scars, his jaw healed but stiff. He wore a dark suit. No badge, no armor, just quiet strength. "Please raise your right hand," the clerk said. He did. "I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." When he began to speak, the room leaned in. His voice was calm, almost soft. "I was eating at a diner in Greektown when they approached. I heard shouting, looked up, and saw guns. I identified myself, told them I was DEA. They didn't listen." "What happened next?" the prosecutor asked. Zay took a breath. "They hit me. I remember the first punch, then a gunshot in the air, then the world went quiet. When I woke up, I was in an ambulance." Park nodded. "Do you recognize the people who assaulted you?" Zay turned his head slowly. His eyes met Luke's. "Yes," he said quietly. "Officer Harlan." He shifted his gaze toward Mia. "And Officer Valdez." Luke swallowed hard. Tears burned his eyes. "I didn't mean to," he whispered under his breath. The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Harlan, you'll have your chance to speak." Defense attorney Carl Becker stood for Luke. "Your Honor, my client was operating under the direction of his superior officer. He believed he was responding to a dangerous armed suspect. There was confusion, chaos, and poor leadership, but there was no intent to harm a federal agent." Park responded instantly. "Intent doesn't erase consequence. Officer Harlan made a choice, to strike a man who wasn't resisting, to ignore warnings from the crowd, and to follow an illegal order. And when that body cam light went dark for 11 seconds, it wasn't confusion. It was cover-up." Judge Singh turned to the jury. "You will consider both actions and intent. Both matter under the law." Then came Ray Old School Carter, the internal affairs detective, as the next witness. His gray hair and steady tone brought a sense of gravity to the room. "I've been with this department 30 years, he said. "I trained Lucas's father. He was one of the best. But this," he pointed to the body cam screen. "This is not policing. This is fear turned into violence." Becker tried to push back. "Detective, do you believe Officer Harlan is beyond redemption?" Ray sighed. "No. I believe he's what happens when a broken system raises another soldier instead of a peacekeeper." The prosecution rested by noon. The defense had little left to say. Mia's attorney requested leniency, citing her lack of experience and immediate remorse. "She has cooperated, Your Honor. She's confessed. She's willing to testify against her department." The judge nodded, noted. When Luke finally spoke, his voice trembled. "I saw my dad in every suspect," he said, his eyes glassy. "I thought being tough would make me like him, but I lost myself. I wasn't protecting anyone that day. I was avenging something I didn't even understand." For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the ceiling vents. Judge Singh looked at him with something close to pity, but not forgiveness. "Officer Harlan," she said slowly, "what you did was not just a mistake. It was a betrayal of your oath, of your badge, of your city." Luke nodded, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I know, Your Honor." The sentencing took place that afternoon. The courtroom was full. Journalists, officers, families, and the public watching from home. Judge Singh read from the bench. "For the assault on a federal officer and the violation of civil rights under color of law, this court sentences Lucas Harlan to 7 years in federal prison." She turned to Mia. For your participation and use of racial language during the unlawful assault, you are sentenced to 24 months of supervised probation and mandatory bias rehabilitation. Consider that mercy. The gavel fell. The sound echoed like a shot. Zay sat motionless, watching as U.S. Marshals led Luke away. For a brief second, their eyes met. Luke's face was pale, almost boyish again. He mouthed something. "I'm sorry." Zay didn't respond. Not yet. Forgiveness would come later, but not in this room, outside the courthouse. Protesters filled the steps. Signs read, "Justice served and 11 seconds too long." Reporters swarmed the podium. Prosecutor Park addressed them first. "Today's verdict is not a victory," she said. "It's a reminder. Power without accountability is corruption, and silence is complicity." Captain Reed stood behind her, expression heavy. She had resigned that morning, taking responsibility for a department that failed to train, to supervise, to protect. "We lost our way," she admitted quietly to a local reporter, "and it took one man's blood to bring us back." That evening, as the sun fell behind the skyline, Zay walked out of the courthouse alone. Reporters shouted his name, but he didn't stop. He stepped onto the sidewalk, feeling the air hit his face, warm, real, alive. For the first time in months, he felt something close to peace. Across the street, a mural was already taking shape. Local artists had painted the outline of a badge breaking in half, light spilling through the crack. At the bottom were 3 words that captured what the trial had meant to the city, and maybe to the nation. Truth doesn't bleed quietly. And in that moment, Detroit began to heal, not because justice was perfect, but because, for once, it had been seen. The second trial began not with sirens or shouting, but with quiet, the kind of stillness that feels heavier than noise. The civil case was filed by Jada Brooks on behalf of herself and her ex-husband, Special Agent Isaiah Zay Brooks. She sat in the front row of the federal courtroom, pale but composed, her hands folded over a small silver locket that held the ultrasound photo she never got to frame. The lawsuit sought damages not just for Zay's injuries, but for the loss of their unborn child, a tragedy caused by the stress of seeing him beaten and bleeding on a live stream viewed by millions. The courtroom felt different this time. Fewer uniforms, more citizens. This wasn't about punishment anymore, it was about truth, and the price of negligence. Judge Amara Singh presided again, firm as stone yet visibly burdened, the same flag behind her bench, the same seal on the wall, but now the case name read, Brooksville City of Detroit Police Department. The federal courtroom was full. Journalists, families, and quiet onlookers who came to see whether justice could stretch beyond the criminal code. Zay sat beside Jada, wearing a dark suit, a small band still visible under his shirt collar where scar tissue ran along his neck. He said little, but his presence alone filled the room with weight. The city's attorney opened with formality. "The Detroit Police Department expresses its deepest regret," he began, reading from a statement. "The actions of the officers do not reflect our values." His words landed flat. Everyone in the room had seen the videos, the reports, the headlines. The images had burned themselves into memory. No amount of apology could wash away the blood. Then came Jada's testimony. Her voice was measured but fragile. "I watched my husband beaten on a screen I couldn't turn off," she said softly. "I called the precinct. I called the hospital. I called God. None of them answered in time." Her words broke halfway through. She pressed the locket between her palms, whispering, "He was 12 weeks. We had just chosen a name." The gallery went silent. Even the defense attorney lowered his eyes. Zay took the stand next. His tone carried the calm of a man who had seen too much to raise his voice. "I forgave them that night," he said. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. What happened in those 11 seconds wasn't just bad policing. It was a symptom of something larger, something trained into us all. Fear. He looked directly at the city attorney. And fear, when uniformed, is the deadliest weapon in this country. Judge Singh asked him one question. Agent Brooks, what do you believe justice looks like today? Zay paused. Justice, he said, is when no one has to be lucky to survive a mistake. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. When they returned, the foreperson's voice wavered as she read the verdict. We, the jury, find the city of Detroit and its police department liable for civil rights violations and emotional damages. We award the plaintiffs $14.2 million. The courtroom gasped. Jada closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Zay reached over and held her hand, the first time they had touched since the attack. Judge Singh wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice steady but filled with moral fire. This court orders immediate national reform in BOLO training protocols and officer pairing standards. Effective immediately. No rookie officer shall be paired with a sergeant under 5 years of field experience. And let this ruling stand as precedent. A broadcasted description is not probable cause. A hoodie is not intent. A color is not guilt. She paused, scanning the room. A black man eating souvlaki is not probable cause. The sentence hit like a sermon. The reporters wrote it down word for word. It would run in headlines across the nation before sunset, within hours. The ripple effect began. The Department of Justice announced a national review of BOLO procedures. Cities from Atlanta to Phoenix suspended their field training policies pending revision. Police academies added new courses on racial bias and situational de-escalation. Federal funding was redirected toward psychological screening and PTSD recovery programs for both officers and victims. Meanwhile, Tyrone T-Bone Watts, the man who handed Deke Monroe his envelope of cash, was arrested in a DEA sting just outside Windsor, Ontario, under interrogation. He admitted the deal outright. Yeah, I paid him, he said coldly. He sold his badge cheap. His words sealed the narrative. The corruption wasn't theory anymore. It was fact. Captain Vanessa Reed faced her own reckoning. The Federal Review Board cited her for negligent supervision and concealment of misconduct. She was demoted, then quietly retired. I should have seen it coming, she said in her exit interview. When loyalty replaces accountability, corruption wears a friendly face. Outside the courthouse, a crowd gathered once more. Signs read, 11 seconds changed America and training saves lives. Reporters surrounded Judge Singh as she exited, but she stopped only once, turning toward the microphones. Justice, she said, isn't about one verdict. It's about building a system that doesn't need heroes to survive. That night, Zay and Jada left the courthouse through a side door to avoid the cameras. They didn't speak much on the drive home. The settlement wasn't victory. It was survival. The money wouldn't bring back what they lost. But it would fund something new, a foundation for police trauma recovery, focused on ending the cycle that created both victim and perpetrator in the quiet of their living room. Jada placed the court document next to the locket on the table. It's over, she whispered. Zay shook his head gently. No, he said, it's beginning. And as dawn broke over Detroit, the first training sessions began under a new name, the Brooks Protocol, a policy born from pain, meant to save lives, for the first time in years. The city exhaled, knowing that justice had not only spoken, it had learned. A year later, the air over Detroit carried a strange kind of quiet. Not peace exactly, but something close. The headlines had faded, the protests had slowed, and the world had moved on. But for those who had lived it, the Greektown incident was not a story. It was a scar. The police cars had new decals now, ones that read, "Serve with Truth." Part of the reforms Judge Amara Singh had ordered. Every rookie went through the Brooks Protocol. Every sergeant was retrained. But reform doesn't erase memory. And memory, for some, is a life sentence. Inside a medium-security prison outside Lansing. Luke Harlan sat across from Isaiah Zay Brooks for the first time since the verdict. The fluorescent lights buzzed above them. Luke had aged fast. The sharp edges of arrogance were gone. His hands, once restless, now lay still on the table. Zay wore a simple gray suit, no badge, no title. Just a man who had come to finish something, for a moment. Neither spoke. The silence felt heavier than the concrete walls. "You didn't have to come," Luke said quietly. "I did," Zay replied, "because if I didn't, this story ends wrong." Luke's eyes glistened. "I've replayed it every day. I saw fear where there wasn't any. I hit a man who didn't raise a hand. You should hate me." Zay leaned forward, his voice calm. "I don't hate you. I hate what made you." Luke frowned. "The system? The culture?" Zay said softly. "It tells young men like you that strength is measured in control and anger. That fear makes you cautious. It doesn't. It makes you blind." Luke swallowed hard. "You forgave me?" Zay nodded slowly. "That night, in the ambulance. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just stops it from owning me. For a long time." They sat in silence. When the guard called time, Zay stood and offered his hand. Luke hesitated, then took it. Two men, one mistake between them, and the weight of a city watching from afar. As Zay walked out, Luke whispered, "I'll make it right someday." Zay didn't look back, but his answer carried across the room like a prayer. "Then start by forgiving yourself." Across town, life had changed for everyone tied to those 11 seconds. Mia Valdez worked as a security guard at a community center on the southwest side, the same kind of place she once patrolled with suspicion. Now she greeted kids by name, breaking up basketball scuffles instead of traffic stops. Some parents still stared, remembering the video, but others saw a woman trying to rebuild. "One apology at a time. People don't forget," she often said. But sometimes they forgive. Captain Vanessa Reed, long retired, volunteered part-time at Zay's new project, the Detroit Center for Police Trauma and Recovery. She handled intake, her badge replaced by a visitor's lanyard. "You can't fix the past," she told every new recruit who came through the door, "but you can make sure it doesn't repeat." The city had changed, too. For the first time in a generation, the Detroit Police Department reported a decline in civilian complaints and use of force cases. The Brooks Protocol, named after Zay, became national law, cited in over a dozen states as the foundation for field training reform. The Justice Department even mandated it for federal agencies. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. At the courthouse downtown, Judge Amara Singh continued to oversee compliance hearings. Her patience was legendary, her tone measured but firm. On the anniversary of the ruling, she stood on the courthouse steps, speaking to a crowd of reporters. "Justice," she said, "is not a single verdict or a number on a check. It's what we do after the cameras leave. It's every quiet act that keeps power honest." The crowd applauded, not with cheers but with understanding. Jada Brooks watched the broadcast from her office at the foundation she and Zay had created. They named it the Brooks Initiative, dedicated to training officers in empathy and supporting families harmed by police violence. She was pregnant again, this time with peace instead of fear. When asked by a journalist why she stayed with the cause after everything, she smiled gently. "Because healing is not the opposite of pain," she said. "It's what pain becomes when you don't let it define you." Tyrone T-Bone Watts didn't live to see the reforms. He was found dead in his prison cell 6 months after his conviction. The official report said suicide. The whispers said revenge. Either way, corruption had eaten its last meal that summer. Zay stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of a new training academy built on the former site of the Greektown precinct. The walls were white, the motto carved into marble, "Protect without prejudice," as cameras flashed. Zay took the podium. His voice carried over the crowd, steady and clear. This city didn't break overnight, and it won't heal overnight. But every act of justice, every reform, every young officer who chooses restraint over rage, that's how we rebuild trust. 11 seconds almost destroyed us. But 11 years from now, I want those seconds remembered for something else, the moment we decided to change. The crowd applauded quietly, not with noise but with respect, somewhere in that sea of faces. Mia stood near the back, eyes wet, and though Zay didn't see her, he somehow knew she was there, as the sun dipped behind the skyline. Detroit glowed gold and blue, two colors forever bound by conflict. Now trying to coexist in something close to redemption, the city didn't forget, and it didn't forgive easily. But it was learning. That night, Zay returned home, placed his badge, the cracked one recovered from Greektown, into a glass case beside his desk. He turned off the lights, sat quietly, and whispered the same words he'd said in court, the words that had outlived the trial, the verdict, and the rage. Hate the system, not the kid. And with that, the story came to its quiet end. Not with applause or outrage, but with the one thing America still struggles to hold on to, the hope that justice, once broken, can still learn to stand again. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a comment, and give a like. It helps keep real stories like this alive. Together, let's make sure truth, justice, and compassion never fade from the conversation.